Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again on the Seafood Matters podcast. In order to help our podcast series, please press subscribe and share it with family and friends. Joining us today is Cydian Kauffman, the founder and owner of Pure Water Northwest, way in Seattle and the surrounding area. Hi, Cydian. Welcome to Seafood Matters.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Can I ask you to tell our listeners how you started right through your career path and how you to where you are today?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I spent most of my life in property, in and around stuff related to property. I sold property, flipped it, got into property management, did that for almost 20 years. So it had nothing to do with water, nothing to do with water science, nothing to do with chemistry. And then I came upon a customer who had really gross water. Not a customer, a tenant. And they had brown water that smelled like rotten eggs. I knew nothing about water. I took it to the lab, and the lab person, when they got the results back to me, they said, "This is healthy water." And I was like, "What? It can't possibly be healthy water." And so they said, "Well, it's within the legal level." And I was like, "What does that mean?" So I went and did my own research. I then contacted a company, Pure Water Northwest, which was founded by Chris Pelton. And Chris explained to me that the EPA sets two values for drinking water, a health limit and a legal limit. And the fact that there are two different values and that the legal limit allows some unhealthy water through made me question a lot of the stuff that I thought I knew about water. So I started getting into that. My daughter started getting eczema. I talked to Chris again, and he explained that a softener can help with that. So I put in a softener. It fixed my daughter's eczema. And I was just like, wow, there's a ton we don't know about water. So I bought into the company. I became an avid student of water, and I've been doing it for 7 years now.
That sounds a wee bit scary, is it? Or double standards almost.
Yeah, there is a double standard. That's exactly right. At least in the United States. So,
And do you think that's relevant in other parts of the world, or would you?
I know the EU has similar things in various areas, but it's not the same everywhere. No, there's some places that have much more strict standards, but that's because they have smaller areas to cover. So the real reason why that happens is the cost. It's far too. It's the science of size. It's far too expensive to treat water for 180,000 people and get it down to like zero arsenic or zero forever chemicals than it is to just have people put some stuff in their home to get rid of the remainder. If you've got a smaller community, if you're treating like 500, 1,000, 2,000, you can oftentimes get more out, but then you do have less money to spend because you have less people paying you. So it becomes a very complex problem.
Wow. If I could ask you then, from what you say there, how important we see it. My wife has been a nurse pretty much the best part of her life. And just say we're about the house and I'll say, oh, I'm feeling a little poorly, or I feel this is wrong or that's wrong or that. Invariably, she'll say, you sure you're drinking enough water?
Yeah. No, I know. That's true. And the thing is, it's a double-edged sword, right? If you had a choice between drinking water that has a little bit of contamination in it and not drinking any at all, obviously you would want to drink the water. But it's usually pretty easy these days to get rid of even a little bit of contamination. An under-counter reverse osmosis will really do the trick on 99% of things. And that's a pretty straightforward and easy solution for people.
And what do you feel, I mean, when they do things like, they say, oh, to help people's teeth, they would add fluoride to the water.
Well, fluoride's a funny topic because there is evidence for sure that adding fluoride to the water increases teeth outcomes. But if large communities of people all generally are using fluoridated toothpaste, does it matter? Scandinavian countries, most of them don't, maybe all of them don't fluoridate. They have better teeth outcomes than we do in the United States, and but they use less sugar. So it does become a complex question. There is evidence in a most recent study by Harvard that is a better study than the one done 20 years ago, that it does have an effect on IQ that is small but noticeable. So to me, if it really for sure, and that study has not been fully vetted yet, but if it does fully have a effect on IQ, then for my money, yeah, we would want to stop fluoridating water if that's the case. Even though teeth outcomes may change a little, we would want to encourage people to, use more fluoride toothpaste. But the science of this to me is not fully there, so I don't have a definitive answer yet for that.
Okay, yeah. If we could move on to seawater and pollution
Yeah,
and the
sure.
state of our seas. From your perspective, how clean is seawater today compared to perhaps a generation ago?
It is dirtier. I mean, it is definitely, feeling the effects of some things. There's more mercury for sure. We really only care about mercury in the long-lived predators, though, like sharks and tuna and swordfish and the like. And even then, eating, if you were to sit down and eat a big plate of tuna, that's not a big deal. If you were to do that a few times a week, that's like maybe a good analogy would be like if you went and sat in the sun too long and got a sunburn. So your body is going to help try and balance that. But mercury is a metal. So being a metal, it is hard for the, I guess, for lack of a better term, the homeostasis engine that is your human body. It is a little bit difficult for it to balance that and clean that from your body. Metals are harder to remove by the body. Some can just sit there in your body for forever. They actually have a process called chelation they use to get rid of metals when they build up too much. So it's a balancing act for sure. But we're still at a point where people can still eat fish for sure. And mercury is one of the larger problems. Microplastics, people talk about microplastics in the ocean. There are so many microplastics in the ocean, it would blow everyone's mind. But also, that doesn't matter very much because the ocean is absolutely gigantic. Everyone knows the ocean is big, but I don't think anyone can fully appreciate just how big it is. It is so enormous that the amount of microplastics in it currently are still basically nothing. And the seafood eating that stuff, while it is filtering up the food chain, we are getting virtually none by comparison to the amount we get just from bottled water and household dust. So for currently seawater microplastics are way down on the list of concerns. Forever chemicals are diluted too much in the ocean to really care. We are getting a teeny bit, but there's much more in local municipalities on average. Eating shrimp or salmon, it's like, or swordfish, it's like a drop. It's like a single drop in a swimming pool as far as problems go. I guess that's what I mean. That's what I'm getting at here. It's not of major concern, if that makes sense. So the biggest thing that I would think of for the ocean is there is some more algae blooming, which is having an effect on the food cycle. That is not something I know a ton about, but I know it's happening. And that is pushing certain animals into areas, which is causing some areas to get clustering, which is causing some areas to get worse mercury or worse microplastics than others. But it is not yet, as far as I can tell from my study, a major concern, the mercury being the highest one.
Yeah, I've dealt with some of the Scandinavian countries in the fishing industry, and one I know, Faroe Islands, which is, if you could imagine, it's almost equidistant between ourselves in the UK and Iceland. And they've been eating whale meat for, it's in their culture, the hundreds of years. But they're at the stage now with the mercury content, they're advising, or I don't know if it's even advising or not allowing, pregnant women, children, and elderly not to eat the whale meat.
I mean, that may make sense. If you eat something big like swordfish or shark, even now, that's not like a dropper in the pool. That's like pouring a cup in a pool or even more. So a whale, like I have no data on that at all. You're really kind of blowing my mind a little bit. Eating whales, that could have, especially whales that eat other predators like orcas, I could imagine that could be a major concern.
What pollutants are creeping in most alarmingly?
Do you mean for seawater or
Yeah.
drinking water?
Well,
Seawater.
why would they be different?
Well, they are a little different. Some things that the hydrologic cycle pulls water off the ocean. The clouds then come over and rain the rain down on the mountains, and then that drifts across the mountains into rivers, into aquifers, and that's pulled up by people to drink. That's a lot of filtering. So what's happening in the ocean versus the drinking water, there's some correlation, but it's certainly not the same. So what the animals eat and collect in their body that we then eat, and when I say animals, I'm talking about fish, versus what gets into the drinking water, they're pretty different.
And would you say wastewater treatment systems doing enough to prevent contamination?
Well, they're helping, but no, they're not doing enough. Which is not me trying to badmouth the governments that are trying to do their work. I just told a story earlier about how shocked I was at how much contaminants get through. But on the other side of the coin, what are they going to do about it? I mean, the amount of carbon that it would take to fully remove the PFAS, the forever chemicals, from 100,000 homes would be like 8 football fields in an area like the Sammamish Highlands. It's which, frankly, they're going to have to do with a new rule they're coming out with. Or they're not going to use carbon, they're going to use anion resin that's charged a certain way, or they're going to figure out the cold plasma destruction of forever chems that they're working on. I don't really know what they're going to do, but it's hard. I know it's hard. I know it's extraordinarily difficult. And that is just a little bit of the reality of the world we live in. I mean, we have fabricated factory chemicals. DuPont, specifically, amongst some other companies, have fabricated some chemicals that are literally so difficult that are so rugged that they're called forever chemicals. They're called forever chemicals because they just go on and on and on. They will outlive our bodies for sure. So that's the reality we're dealing with. These forever chems are definitely a difficult problem.
It strikes me that's a scary term just by the name, what they're calling it.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit scary. And, just, I really like trying to be balanced. I really think that, if you got a company like DuPont making these things in order to, they're not trying to be evil or anything. They're coming up with a chemical which then they can put onto a pan, and then they can say, look, your eggs don't stick to the pan anymore. This is called Teflon. Or they can put it on a jacket and say, hey, look, rain won't stick to your jacket. This is called Gore-Tex. Or they, even more importantly, and this has saved many, many lives, they say, hey, firefighters, water will make a grease fire worse. Right now you're dumping sand on it. I can give you a foam that expands, that can be put into a container that's 4 feet by 6 feet, that you can carry on the back of your rig, that will expand when you spray it out to a size that you can put out an entire factory grease fire from this small container, because we've created a chemical that's so rugged fire cannot destroy it. It will destroy the fire. I mean, what are you going to do? Say no to that? It saves lives.
Yeah, but it's got
Has a cost.
we pay a price for it.
We do, yeah. I mean, my dad always used to say, today's solutions are tomorrow's problems.
Yeah, well, that's a good
And
way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I've seen that over and over and over again.
When you said I was obviously reading up on the subject, water coming closer to our chat together. What's the term PFAS?
That's a forever Ken. It's I still can't pronounce it. God, I cannot pronounce it. But yeah, it's. I always want to be able to pronounce this because I pride myself on being able to pronounce things. Polyfluoroalkyl. Polyfluoroalkyl. Anyhow, that's what we're talking about. Those are forever chemicals. There's 100,000 different kinds of forever chemicals. We've tested 6. So yeah, we're behind. We're behind the curve on these a little bit.
Yeah, and with that, then like things like industrial agriculture, how
Yeah.
do land-based industries, farming, waste treatment, chemical plants influence quality of seawater?
Yeah, that's super important because every city, town that's close to the sea, they all have storm drains, and the storm drains usually dump right into the ocean. Those storm drains are capturing everything that runs along the ground. So if we've got a factory that's got waste product that goes into the air, which then is captured by rain clouds and dumps on the ground, if they're misdumping their chemicals, if people are using their product and there's runoff from them, if people are taking pharmaceuticals, urinating into the their toilets, and then that goes into wastewater treatment, which can't capture all of them, and that dumps into the sea. All of that is definitely getting put back into the cycle, and then the human bodies become the filter. If we don't filter it in the house, whatever the municipalities filter, anything that gets past that, if we don't then filter it in our homes, we become the filter for that. And that either stays in our body or goes back into circulation, or it breaks down. In some cases, it breaks down. You're not breaking down forever chems, but some of those pharmaceuticals break down over time. Some of the factory chems break down over time, but then it becomes elemental. Arsenic's never breaking down. It's on the periodic table. Uranium's not breaking down. So yeah, there is a cycle or a circle, whatever analogy you want to use, for sure.
You've mentioned arsenic just in the short time we've been chatting. You've mentioned it a few times. Is there arsenic in the water?
Oh, so much arsenic, yes. But humans are really good at dealing with arsenic. I like to have zero arsenic in my water. I have none. My municipality puts out about 0.008 parts per million of arsenic. That is like a couple drops in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's more than I want, for sure, because arsenic's a metal and it'll build up in your body. And because I have kids, and I definitely don't want their developing organs and their developing bodies to have it. But people have been drinking arsenic forever. Before we had factories, before it was in the rivers, it's on the periodic table of elements. So it is therefore something that can be in water. And arsenic happens to have 2 states, which makes it bind to water in 2 different ways, which can make it travel with water, even through steam. It can travel through water through steam. So it can, very low levels, that does get rid of a lot of it, but distillation, but not all of it. So yeah, it is a chemical that is found on Earth in many, many places. So it is therefore found in the water in many, many places.
I have heard it's in things like the seeds on apples and some of our fruit, but never the water.
Yeah, that's true. It is in apples. It's in apple juice, but not. Again, these are not super high levels, right?
Yeah, yeah.
These are not to the point where people should be not drinking apple juice. They should just not be living off apple juice. But we kind of know that already.
Yeah.
We're not yet to the point where we're like the sky is falling. We are at the point where people should be going, I should take a look at maybe getting a treatment system in my home. I should probably, within the next 6 months to a year, get something in my home. I hope in 10 years I'm not back on this podcast saying something else, but right now, people should be looking to treat their own water in their own home, I believe. It is there, it is at that point. But people can go another 10 years and maybe even 20 and still be fine. We are hitting a point of building contamination in municipalities that unless the technology changes, water treatment inside the home will become more and more and more required.
Moving to the impact on seafood and fisheries, what's the real risk of we've talked a bit about the microplastics, mercury, forever chemicals, and that stuff. If they're ending up in the fish and shellfish we eat.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know as much about this as as the other things we've been talking about, but I will say that I know that we do have pharmaceutical residue has been identified in seafood in filtering valves, oysters, mussels, clams. We've found antibiotics, hormones, painkillers, antidepressants, and that's because they bioaccumulate. So, and in some areas, it's been crazy levels where it's caused mutation in the fish. But in most places, it's at pretty low levels. They're like in the nanograms or micrograms, so thousands or billions or millionths. Basically, it's not to the level where we're like in most places. In some places, it has been crazy, but in most places, they're kind of silent hitchhikers in these little fit in mussels and clams, and it's like I don't know, a medical cabinet soup. It's completely random what may be in it, but it is still pretty low levels.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, we've from time to time in certain areas around our coastline, there'll be algae blooms. And I think it's in the summer months if the water's warmer, and it gets quite alarming. They'll maybe come with a reading that is so many hundred parts per million, but then when you're told it's a fraction of what would just even give you a sore stomach, never mind kill you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little worried about the algae bloom amount. I don't know enough about it. I will admit to that. I know that it is part of a natural cycle, but if it's happening more, that will starve oxygen from a whole area and it will intensify contamination because there's less flow. It could make those mussels and clams be just deadly to eat. In some cases, it can by starving oxygen, it's completely changing the ecosystem in that area. So it, really, things have to be in balance. I mean, I've almost thought of and I could be completely wrong about this analogy, but I've almost thought of algae blooms as kind of like the forest fires of the sea. Forest fires are kind of required for the natural cycle of decay and growth in forests. They're a good thing, and in fact, humans trying to stop them have actually prevented positive effects on the land. They've prevented the actual natural cycle from occurring. So I could be wrong, but I've always thought of algae blooms as kind of the forest fires of the sea. But if it gets to be too much, then that's too much death and decay and intensification of contaminants and all that. So I don't know enough to be able to speak more than that, though.
How much would you say is scare story and how much is grounded in hard evidence?
Well, there's some hard evidence for sure that it is on the rise. Whether or not that is a reason to be afraid, we should be working against it. We should be cautious, and we should actually care about climate change and algae blooms and the effects on the ecosystem. We should care about that, and we should do something about it. I have not seen enough evidence for saying that it is at the disaster level. Some people say it is. I have studied it a little bit. I'm not a climate scientist though, so I certainly am not the person to say one way or the other for sure. I just haven't seen it myself yet, but I've seen enough to know that it is not something to just ignore.
Shellfish like mussels and oysters filter huge volumes of water. What can they tell us about the health and of coastal ecosystems?
I mean, they are canaries in the coal mine. They are honestly better than, in some cases, they are better than laboratories at identifying contaminants. Um, they're so reliable that a town actually, some places, and I know of one place, and I can't remember where it was in Germany. They actually use bivalves, they use a clam to shut off water to a water source. So they have a river coming in, and that river dumps into an aquifer, not an aquifer, but a reservoir which people drink from. And they put down a bivalve down there like a clam, and they attach literally a solenoid to it. So if the clam closes, then it shuts the entire river source off. It dams it up so that that river no longer pours into the reservoir, because the bivalve's monitoring of contaminants is so good. They are so good at telling when contaminants are bad enough that they need to close, that it has been a more reliable and more accurate way and a more instantaneous way to shut off a bad source of water than humans doing their testing. It's amazing. They're amazing, actually.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
How are small fishing communities impacted by declining water quality?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I don't know enough about small fishing communities to be able to speak to this. I could only guess that regulatory bodies would come in and tell them that they can't use certain things, or that they have to. I would just imagine that it makes their life harder, because regulatory bodies are going to come in and start monitoring and giving orders in relation to the health levels found in fish. And so if that's the case, then I would imagine that they're going to have how they fish controlled. And I would also imagine that it would possibly affect the cycle in an area, which could then push where they have to collect from further and further out. Those are the only two things I would be able to guess at. Do you know more than I do about this? Because I don't know enough about this particularly for small communities.
No, that's fair enough. How well do current monitoring systems track contaminants in oceans and coastal zones?
Yeah, I don't actually know
Uh-huh.
whether or not the monitoring systems in those areas are up to snuff. I think the actual monitoring is, we're not like testing for mercury with monitoring systems. We're doing that by just, we get some fish, we then take it to a lab, we cut it to pieces, we dilute it and put a flame on it in order to separate things, and then we can test that particular fish in that particular area. So we're not doing a good job of actually monitoring the sea in real time. We don't really have the technology to be able to do lab monitoring like in a computerized setting very well, other than stuff like pH, acidity level, that dissolved solids, that kind of things, which for seawater is already off the chart. So yeah, the technology for the monitoring is still very old school.
Would you say the bivalve mollusks and that, like mussels and scallops and things, would to see them in an area, would that be any indication that that area, the water quality was good?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be somewhat good. Yes. And seeing, because of what we just talked about, seeing like, are they all closed? Are they like clamped shut? And looking for, the signs that people know about, like red tide and stuff. But yeah, if the bivalves are drinking that water and like letting that water in, that does help quite a bit with monitoring that for sure. Absolutely.
Would they just filter any water, or would they be trying to find clean water?
They have not the same requirements that humans do. So they need oxygen, they need a certain level of salt, they need a certain balance of pH, but they're sensitive to pollution. So oil spillage, sewer surges, algae blooms, degraded water, they can survive accumulating stuff like pharmaceuticals, PFAS, and microplastics in their tissue. They're very tolerant of that kind of contaminant, but yeah, they will notice very quickly for the really bad stuff like sewer or sewage stuff, heavy bacterial contamination, that kind of stuff. So they they definitely notice when oxygen gets taken away. So when it comes to toxic algae blooms, they definitely notice that heavily. You can also use them as logbooks for contamination. So they that is one way that scientists actually pull mussels out, cut them open, and like identify the toxins in an area for sure.
Okay. Do you feel governments are ahead of the problem, or as always playing catch up?
Yeah, they're definitely not ahead for sure. As I mentioned before, there's 100,000 different kinds of forever chemicals, at least 14,000, and there's a supposition that there's over 100,000. And we've identified six. And that is because our ability to produce chemicals that are in the nano scale is exceeded by our ability to test at the nanoscale. We can test at the micro scale all day long. Testing at the nanoscale requires such better equipment and more time. It is just that we are a little behind the curve on testing at that level for sure. Filtering at that level, we're also slow on, and we can't filter in large scale at the nanoscale. The only thing we can do for that is carbon or ion exchange or flocculation. Things like that are the ways that we filter that, but we are not as good as we need to be at it for sure.
What's a nanoscale?
So think of it at like 1,000 times smaller than. Think of it as like instead of a single drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, it would be like a single drop in a lake. It
Okay.
is
Yeah.
so yeah, it's so tiny that we should not care about it. But the problem is with PFAS, for example, it hides in pockets and clusters together. So you can test for PFAS in one area and it's completely different than testing in a different area. It does not dilute as well as other contaminants do. So it is difficult when you have something that's a nano product that is then spreading and trying to kind of hide from you. It's a problem.
Do you feel existing food safety regulations, for example, EU, USA, international, are really keeping harmful contaminants off our plates?
Um, I don't know enough about whether or not they're doing enough, honestly. I know that their job is hard. I know that they could probably do more if they had more money. And that becomes a political thing, right? That becomes a matter of politics and political will. So I know that more could be done, but I also know that it's very difficult. I know that what they're up against at the types of things we're dealing with now are very difficult to deal with. So PFAS that gets down to the molecular scale, they spread and persist. They're made with super strong carbon fluorine bonds, the strongest, some of the strongest you're ever going to find in chemistry, which is why they're called forever chemicals. They have no color, they have no smell, they have no taste. Same with arsenic, same with cyanide. You cannot tell they're there. You just cannot tell without testing. And then measuring them requires very sensitive lab equipment. Traditional water plants can barely touch it, like arsenic, which has multiple forms. It is difficult to remove. So to solve it, they have to use uh, catalytic carbon, which is not going to always fully remove it. They have to use a special anion resin, and so that is expensive, and it takes a lot of it in order to do it. So yeah, I would say they're doing really good for what they're up against, but they are not necessarily doing all they can.
Of course, I suppose everything turns political anyway at some stage like this.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I agree with you.
Yeah. Do you see blind spots remain? Any new pollutants or the like?
Um, yeah, I mean, blind spots, as in people are not looking at it as much as they should. Yeah, I mean, PFAS is a blind spot. Forever chems are a blind spot. I mean, we have like I say, there's 100,000. There's so many thousands of them, and we've tested for about six. We recently did a test on 20, roughly 20 rivers in Middle America, and they found PFAS in 18 of them. Municipalities are testing them slowly, and they're finding them over and over and over and over again, where they never knew that they were. Arsenic is not always tested for. One of the biggest blind spots is having two standards for drinking water. That creates that creates a silly scenario like I described earlier, which is where a laboratory will say, this is healthy water, when they really mean this is legal water. And those are not the same thing. They're just not. This is saying this is within the legal level is what a laboratory should say, because that's accurate. But they say this is healthy. And all of this really has to do with the fact that people love testing water before they've started drinking it. After they've started drinking it, they really don't want to test it, if that makes sense. They don't want to know. So
You'd have thought it would be the opposite.
it's the ostrich effect. You don't want to be told that you've been drinking water that's bad for you, right?
Gee,
Yeah.
I could almost sound grossly naive by saying to you, I thought I didn't think there was anything wrong with the water we were drinking.
Yeah, well, to ameliorate that concern, because you're running into right now what everyone I talk to runs into. I thought my water was good. You're scaring me. And I don't want to scare people. Your body is amazing at balancing against contaminants. It's amazing. But the effects of that work, the effects of it doing its job to help balance is inflammation. And then later, if it builds up enough, it's organ failure or cancer. So that organ failure and cancer is not happening right away. All that's happening at the beginning is inflammation. And water is anti-inflammatory. So it's not like it's only giving you inflammation. It is helping you more than it's hurting, for sure, to drink water. So
Uh-huh.
don't stop drinking water. But if you want to make it cleaner so that it's a little better for you, a little better at removing inflammation and doesn't cause stress on your body and leaves your body more available to fight other toxins, like toxins in the air or food, then it's pretty easy to treat it. It's pretty easy to solve the problem for you in your home.
What would you do to make it easy to change it?
Yeah, so what I like to do, just as a catch all, is just an under counter reverse osmosis system. Just underneath your counter or on top of your counter, install a system that's called a reverse osmosis, and that will just treat all the water. Um, It is not 100%. There are reasons to get whole home systems, water that systems that come in and right where your shut off valve in your home is, that would shut all the water off to your home. We put a system in right there, and then all your water has amazing water. I have customers who have, for $5,000, they have water that's better than bottled water. They're showering in bottled water, basically. That's a little excessive. You don't need to do that, but it's also fun. It's fun to do. But for very much less money, you can just get a single source of drinking water, and as long as you just drink all your water from that source, and put it through reverse osmosis, that is going to get 99% of what's in there.
That's really interesting. And you could have that in your house under your sink or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really can be really inexpensive in some places also, like very, very affordable.
Yeah. On the subject, we currently talk a lot about the climate change and that, and not everybody accepts and believes it. But with the if it warming seas, acidification, changing currents affect the quality of the water and seafood safety, does it?
I mean, yeah, it's going to have an effect for sure. It'll create changes. I mean, everything has an effect. Everything. There are changes occurring in the ocean all the time, in the rivers. And the animals who live there, the creatures that live there, are incredibly sensitive to it. And it has effects in ways we really can't predict, you know? Getting rid of wolves in one of the national parks. I'm sure many people have heard this story before. Getting rid of wolves in one of the national parks actually completely eroded or changed, led to a cycle of effects that changed the plants that were there, which completely changed the water that was there and starved out a town of water. It was because the wolves were keeping a population of birds down, and those birds then blew up, and or maybe it was grazing animals. Whatever, it created an effect on the cycle that had an effect that people never would have predicted. I mean, I, I don't know enough about the cycle through the sea. Being really focused on water science, I can't trace it down exactly, but there's going to be an effect of it. Whether or not the natural efforts to balance that effect will keep up with it is kind of unknown. So far, it has. So far, it's been okay. There could be a breaking point. There has been throughout history, and that's why it's a good idea to try and stay on top of it.
Some of the things you're saying there reminds me. As a child, I'm from a small fishing village, and it's got a river. We used to be quite fascinated when, just say, there was a period of heavy rain, and the river would be what we called in spate, because there was a lot of water, and it was coming into the sea. And out in the bay, we would see a arc-shaped line, and you could tell the difference in the colour from the water that come down the river and the sea.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, you're right.
is that is that the kind of thing would that be similar to what you're talking about?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, rivers flow into estuaries, flow into the ocean, right? And pollution's cumulative. You have a nitrate spill in the Midwest, you could end up with a dead zone in the Gulf. It can happen, for sure. The ocean's like it's the ultimate mixing bowl. Whatever we pour in upstream eventually ends up there. Luckily, it's huge. That is the biggest thing that we have going for us is the size of our planet is so big, and the currents are still so strong, and the water moves so much that we luckily have a huge buffer for how much we contaminate. But it won't last forever.
That's a wee bit scary.
It won't last forever. It will. It will. Maybe outlast us, though. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah, but
Yeah.
not, yeah. The things you've talked about, like the plastics, the PFAS, I think you've called it. What's coming down the pipeline? The nanomaterials, pharmaceuticals, antibiotic resistance.
Yeah. Well, all that is already happening. Coming down the pipeline might be some more positive stuff. I mean, we have only just recently, in a perfect lab setting, proven that cold fusion is possible. With cold fusion, which we're probably 50 years from that, maybe 100 years, who knows. But with cold fusion would come the ability to turn seawater into, with one process, simultaneously, we could take seawater, which is heavy in hydrogen, we could turn it into power and drinking water with one process. So in 100, 200 years, we could be simultaneously cleaning, drinking, and getting power from seawater with one process. So the future could look pretty great. We just got to make it there. We got to last 100 years. We definitely should. We probably will as it is, but it would be very smart for us to, you know, not sit on our laurels, not do nothing about the contamination problem, not do nothing about climate change, and work towards those points where we have those technologies more available.
Do you feel, I'm just imagining it from being in the industry yourself, your own company, do you feel, or is it happening that there's a danger? Because I have to put my hand up from listening to you. It's almost staggers me. It's something I've just always just taken for granted. Water.
You mean drinking water?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's real. I mean, the and I'm sorry to to break bad news, but I don't want to only break bad news. No one's dying tomorrow from this. No one's. I mean, people could go their whole life then and notice the effects only in the last 5, 10 years of their life. But it's such a small thing uh, to mediate out to decrease even the small amount of contaminants that some people have. And some people have large amount of contaminants. It's not the same for everyone. But it's such a small thing to fix it that I just recommend people really look at it. What I'm really here always when I'm coming on podcasts, I'm trying to add value. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to be fun. But the main thing I'm trying to do is not have people be scared and like to the point where they just feel depressed, but instead realize for your own home, it's not that hard to fix. It's really not that expensive, and it's really pretty easy to make it so that at your home you have really really clean water. So that's what I hope people take away from this. Not that the problem is worse than they thought. Yes, the problem is worse than you thought. That is true. But that it's not hard to fix. It's really 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 not that big a deal. Either get an under counter RO, or if you have a little more money, have an expert come by and test your water and get you a customized solution. One or the other. Just do one of those and you'll be fine.
It's quite a funny story, actually. It was in our local courtroom, and the sheriff had this guy up in front of him who had been a naughty boy. He did a bit of excessive drinking and got into a bit of trouble. And the sheriff described, well, it was just a small part, but his comment about the guy in front of him was the only thing he could see that he was good at was converting whiskey into water.
That's fun.
You reminded me of that. What innovations excite you most in terms of cleaning or monitoring water?
Oh, the cleaning is still, reverse osmosis is still the best technology for cleaning the water. Monitoring wise, we still have to rely on laboratory testing. We still do not have the best instantaneous monitoring. Cleaning wise, the best technology is still reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis has a downside of being slow and having waste that it produces. The way it works is it's literally taking all the bad water, the bad in your water, condensing it down and flushing that bad water down a drain, thereby giving you good water. It's splitting the water into good and bad. So it's a process that requires pressure, it requires time, it has a failure rate. If you don't dilute it into a tank, you can get some contaminant, higher level of contaminants. So some of those tankless reverse osmosis, I really don't like. So yeah, it's definitely the best technology. It's not as nice if you have a larger system that's for your whole house, but it's the least expensive way to get the contaminants down to virtually nothing for a point of use. If you do reverse osmosis for your whole house, it's one of the most expensive things you can do, but then you have whole house reverse osmosis. And we certainly can't do reverse osmosis for a whole city yet. So the science of size applies here. Size matters for reverse osmosis. How much you're treating matters.
You know, it reminds me what you're saying, Cydian. I We were doing some work in the house, and I looked at filter similar to what you said, and the tradesman that was doing the work when we said, "Oh, we're getting this," he looked at us, my wife and I, uh, as if we were crazy, and says, "What? Filter our water? Do you know, north of Scotland, how clean our good our quality our water is." And I just think now, thinking back on that with you talking, I think, well, how would he have known?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people make that assumption a lot that the water is good in an area. And it is it is sometimes true, but it's sometimes not because people make assumptions based on taste and smell and sight, and they can't necessarily know from that. There's the majority of contaminants that can hurt you. You can't smell, you can't see, you can't taste. So that
And
makes sense.
absolutely, totally. And it just reminds me, it was just maybe 2 to 3 years ago, we were looking at it, and I got a recommendation of a company to speak to, and I was actually quite surprised because the system that we were sort of looking at, which I have to confess we didn't buy, but you're certainly telling me I need to go and get it. But the one that we were looking at, which well, you'll know exactly. I mean, what it was good for was metals and chemicals.
Yeah. So that could be anything, but was it reverse osmosis?
I think so. I think that term commented, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah. What I really would like people to know is that if you don't filter your water, you're the filter. So, and that's okay. Your body's good at it, but it's also a good idea to, at some point, take a look at whether or not you need to filter your own water. And it is pretty easy these days to filter simple under counter reverse osmosis so that you have one point of use for your drinking water is a really easy way to make sure you're not drinking most things. It's not 100%, but it helps a lot. And if you've got a little more money, do some thorough testing with an expert and have them design you something that's customized based on the water results. And then you're set for decades, usually. You're set. You have to do filter changes every once in a while. That's normal life maintenance, and you'll be very happy you did it, I think.
Would you recommend a dedicated tap for that water?
Yeah, that I would recommend that. I like the idea of people getting their water from one tap that's dedicated. It's the most efficient way to do it. But some people can make it be for their whole house. You can get water treatment for your entire house. So
Cydian, that point you made, I think, is an excellent way to fold up. I hope you're telling me I've got it right.
yeah,
If you don't get your water filtered, you're the filter.
that's right.
Cydian, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.